Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about what the steps are to building and retaining a solid team, and joining us to contribute to the conversation is Mark Oristano. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I appreciate it.
We're so glad to have you. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Well, my background basically is in professional football, American football. I spent 30 years as a broadcaster in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys, the original Dallas Cowboys, and the Houston Oilers franchises. And I learned from the Cowboy franchise and from their general manager and president, a legendary figure in the NFL named Tex Schramm. Texas E. Schramm was actually his full name, but we called him Tex, of course. I learned his secrets for running an organization to keep people around forever and ever. People stayed with the Cowboy organization for 25, 30 years. And this was an organization that everybody in the country in sports wanted to work for. So they had their pick of people. And it was just Tex's secrets of how to treat people and how to treat employees that kept people around for a long, long time. And I would often sit with him and discuss his theories for how he made this work and why it was so successful. We had basically, with the Cowboys, we had two teams. We had the team on the field, the football players, which I was not a part of. That was run by Tom Landry, the head coach. And we had the front office team, our job was to make certain that everything went smoothly for the team on the field, whether it was a road trip or an autograph signing session or a TV interview, whatever it was. We were there to help facilitate things to make their job easier. And our team off the field was just as successful as our team on the field. And that was, it was a great place to work for a long time.
And I guess just to before we get into, what kind of made that happen, what were the indications that you were successful? What was, why do you think these steps that we'll talk about in a minute, that you can claim that they were successful?
Well, on the field, you were successful if you won the Super Bowl, obviously, and we did that several times. Off the field, you were successful off the field if you helped the team on the field win the Super Bowl. And strangely enough, people who would ask about what it was like to work in the front office during the season, during the actual playing of games from August preseason through January playoffs, that was the easiest time of the year for us because everything was regimented, everything was done by checklists, everything was laid out in advance. The off season was our toughest time because that's when we tore everything apart. We looked at every procedure that we had. We redid all our checklists. We said, did this go right? Did this go right? How can we improve this? That was always a question on the front of our mind. And we really worked at making sure that everything ran as smoothly as possible. So how we measured our success was how well we were able to assist the players and coaches in getting their job done. We were their support team. And if they had a good season, and if everybody knew, what time the charter flight was leaving from the airport and what time they had to be on the bus and where they had to go for a personal appearance, if everything worked right, if everything was smooth as silk, then we knew we'd done a good job.
And so you talk about, employee retention and keeping these, people like within, the Cowboys. It doesn't have to be so hard. So what are your kind of recommendations on how do we keep our great people?
Well, Tex had 3 rules for running any organization. And these rules work if you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Philharmonic or the CIA. It doesn't make any difference. And the 3 rules are really very simple. Rule number 1, hire the best people you can find. Duh, that's a tough one. Yeah, it's going to cost you more up front because they're better people. You don't want to go with cheap people. You don't want to go with people who aren't going to work out in your team. So you spend a little more up front to hire the best people you can, people who will stay longer, people who will think outside the box, to use a cliche, people who will show up early, stay late, who are enthusiastic about being there. Number 2 is, after you've hired the best people you can find, you train them your way. And that's simply a way of saying, if you're the Cowboys and you've signed a new quarterback, you're not going to give him the Los Angeles Rams playbook. You're going to give him your playbook. You're going to say, this is how we do things. And then you're going to explain why you do them that way. Why is a very underused word in the corporate world. If you can explain to your people why things are done this way, they'll buy into the whole situation and they'll understand what they're doing, what their particular job is much better. So you got to hire the best people you can, train them your way. Step number 3, get out of their way and let them do the job you hired them to do. Don't micromanage. If you stand over their shoulder watching everything they do, they're going to feel like they're 8 years old and mom is watching them do their arithmetic homework. That's not the way to get productive work out of people. Leave them alone, let them do their job. If they make a mistake, correct them gently. They make the same mistake a second time, correct them a little more firmly. If they make the same mistake a third time, you might want to go back and revisit rule number one, which is hire the best people you can find. But those three rules were basically Texas blueprint. And then the overall thing, and I think this is the smartest thing I ever heard any business person ever say. I once asked him, why is this such a happy place to work? I mean, there's a lot of pressure in the pro football world. Why do people stay for 20, 25, 30 years? And Tex said, because nobody does their best work in a climate of fear. And that really hit home to me, because I worked at places where you feared for your job every day and they ruled you with fear. And that's the feeling that you get when you walk into the office and you know, if you see your boss, you're going to feel depressed immediately. That's a terrible way to live. And Tex did everything he could to make sure that people didn't feel that way.
And so, I mean, I guess let's talk about what happens in that type of environment, an environment of fear. Like, what are some of the behaviors we start to see? And then obviously, as we're talking about, it results in turnover. But before we get there, what kind of behaviors do you start to see?
Well, let me give you two examples from my actual work life. In 1975, I was the weekend sportscaster for the CBS TV station here in Dallas, where I live. I had been there 6 weeks and I had yet to meet the general manager, my boss. One day I'm waiting to get on the elevator to go down to the newsroom. The elevator door opens and the general manager's on the elevator reading a newspaper. So I get on the elevator and I say, "Good morning, Mr. Smith," not his real name. And he drops his newspaper. He looks at me over the top of the newspaper like this. Then he snaps the newspaper back up and keeps reading. Never says a word to me. I didn't last real long there. Contrast that with 1 year later. I can give you the exact date this happened, September 26, 1976. I was a game day assistant for the Cowboy PR staff. I usually got to the stadium 3 hours before kickoff to get my section of the press box ready to work. This day, I got there midway through the second quarter. I was very late. They all knew I was going to be late because on this day, September 26, 1976, my first child was born, my son, Kelly. So they all knew I was going to be late. They covered for me. Everything was cool. The Tuesday after each game, we had a thing we called the Landry Lunch, where Coach Tom Landry would meet with the media and answer questions, talk about the game. The PR department each week would put out a sheet with statistics on it, and at the bottom with a list of the big plays of the game. Now, unbeknown to me, because I had nothing to do with preparing this sheet, Tuesday after that game that I was late for, the big play of the game was listed as being Kelly Robert Oristano, who showed up at Presbyterian Hospital weighing 7 pounds, 6 ounces and kept his father away from the first half of the Colts game. After that was passed around, everybody in the room, including Tex and Coach Landry, came over to congratulate me. Which company would you rather work for? The TV station or the Cowboys? No question. And it's just that kind of thing. I mean, not getting too morose and talking about my horrible work experiences. I actually worked for a company that fired me. Well, didn't fire me. They let me go because of salary conditions. But it happened the day after I got back from my mother's cremation. They let me go. It was a Friday. They couldn't give me the weekend to get over what I'd just been through.
Wow.
So, it's stuff like that. You have to treat people the way you want to be treated. It's the golden rule. It's so simple and people think it doesn't work, but it works like a charm.
And those sound like very simple things. So, I mean, I know a lot of companies are looking for extravagant ways to retain their people, but that sounds pretty simple and like it doesn't cost any money. What are your thoughts there?
No, it doesn't. And I think the reason that it's so perhaps untried in a lot of places is because it is so simple. People think, well, this can't work. I have my MBA and I go ahead all my management analysis and I know all the terms and all the jargon. Well, the jargon is if you think it would be rotten to have somebody do it to you, don't do it to somebody else. It's a matter of just being a nice guy, finding out who'll fit into your organization. There's a wonderful story about the CEO of the Schwab investment company, whose name, if I remember correctly, his name is Walt Ettinger. And he has a test that he does when he's bringing on a new manager, a new leader. He'll take him to breakfast at a coffee shop in town. And he'll tell the head of the coffee shop, look, make sure that the waiter screws up my friend's order really bad, gets everything wrong. Don't worry, nobody will get mad. I'll give him a really big tip, but just make sure he messes everything up. That way, when the guy puts in his order and it comes back and it's all wrong, he sees how the guy reacts or the man or the woman reacts, to the order being incorrect. And if he looks at the waiter and goes, I didn't order this way, let's get this fixed, I don't want to hire this guy. He doesn't have good people skills. But if he says, pardon me, so I asked for the eggs sunny side up and not scrambled. Is there any way we can get this exchange? If he treats them nice, this is the kind of guy that you want to have around your company. So, how hard can it be? Well, if you don't believe in it, it can be really hard. But the only way to believe in it is to try it and see how well it works.
How much do you think, though, I guess with some people, I mean, obviously, some of the behaviors are very extreme, and that should be obvious, but maybe some of the other behaviors, do you think some people may just not realize how they're coming across? And if so, how can an organization help those people see that maybe their approach is not one that's really, treating people the best that they could be treated?
I think that's a very valid point. And I think eventually, no matter what level you're at, from the top on down, there has to be somebody who gives you an evaluation too. You can't just evaluate the people below you. If whatever team you have, whether it's a team of accountants or a team of nurses or a team of football players, you have to have people around you who will tell you the truth. And if somebody says to you, hey, you were a little harsh with him dealing with that problem, you need to sit back and say, well, what did I do wrong? What have I done different from the last time? Why do you think that? Tell me how you think it could have been better. You have to be open to being honest about yourself before you can be honest with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's a part of growing up, not so much in terms of age, but in terms of maturation in dealing with other people. You can't treat them as your enemy. There are going to be times it's going to be tough. There are going to be times you have to let people go for whatever reason, and it should hurt you to do that. But one of the best ways to find out how you're getting along, I've heard people refer to it as MBWA, management by walking around.
Yeah.
You walk around the place, meet your people. Even if you have 1,000 employees, if you meet 10 a day just to say hello, in 100 days, you'll have met everybody. And you find out, who's trying to buy a new car, who's got a kid going to college, or, you don't become their best buddy and go have a beer with them after work every day, but you realize that they're people who have the same problems and desires that you have.
Right. Absolutely. And, I guess talking about, you mentioned, the 3 points, and the first one was hiring the right people. And we have had a few episodes on hiring, but would love to get your thoughts on, how do you find that right talent and make sure that they're a good fit for your organization?
Well, I don't think that you look for somebody who can come in right away and be an instant superstar who already knows everything about the business. That's kind of, if I see someone like that, I'm thinking this person may be a little too egotistical for their own good. You want somebody who understands the basics of what they're going to be asked to do. Somebody who's eager to learn more. I think being eager to learn is one of the most important things you're going to come up with. You want to be able to see that they are willing to learn, that they're willing to be a part of the team, and that they have a desire to not impress you with how much they know, but impress you with the fact that, I think I'd be a good fit here because of A, B, C, D, and because of my background, E, F, G. And I'd really I'd value the chance to come here and be a part of your team. It's not just that you want to create a team. It's you got to find people who want to be part of a team too. It's one of the really great fun things in life, being part of a large group of people who have a shared goal. And when everybody knows what the goal is, your job as the boss is to lay out what the goal is and tell everybody why they're there, and then stand back and watch them as they do the job to get you there, not to do it all yourself. General Patton didn't get out in front with a rifle and lead the charge. He made the big speech and he planned the big plans, and then the GIs went out and did the fighting. And you have to find people who are willing to learn, willing to grow, and willing to buy into your organization and your beliefs.
Yeah. And then I guess, how do you, once you find those people, I mean, how did, the Cowboys maybe help set them off on the right direction? When you bring a new hire in, making sure they understand the culture, understand the objectives, understand where the organization is headed, so that they're, starting out on the right foot.
Well, this is another one of Tex's genius moments. When he was talking with one of his employees, and he came up with a complex project or idea or whatever, he would tell us, he would say, if I ask you a question and you don't know the answer, tell me you don't know. but that you'll have the answer on my desk in 30 minutes. So
Mm,
he was giving us permission to be ignorant and to
mhm.
not know something. And now this was back in the 70s. So, they have it on your desk in 30 minutes. Today with Google, you have it on your desk in 10 seconds. But he was giving us the opportunity to both admit that we didn't know something, but then to go out and learn it and find out what it was and grow ourselves that way as we got the answer on his desk in 30 minutes. And that was a very important part of it. And the other part is it varies. It leaves football a little bit and goes into basketball. But one of the people that I got to meet during my time with the Cowboys was John Wooden, the great UCLA basketball coach who won 10 straight national titles back in the 70s. And every year, this is John Wooden who coached Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton and all these great players at UCLA for 35, 36 years. The first thing he did in the first practice every year was sit down on the floor with his players and teach them how to put on their sneakers and socks. Okay, now these were high school and college kids. They
Mhm.
knew how to put their sneakers and socks on. He wasn't teaching them that. What he was teaching them was very simple. He said, look, if you put your socks on right and you pull them all up and there's no seams and there's no gaps and they're all smooth, and then you put your sneakers on right and you lace them up good and tight, you're not going to get blisters. If you don't get blisters, you won't miss playing time. If you don't miss playing time, we'll win more games. What he was teaching them was one of the most important things you can teach an employee, and that is if you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves. Very
Mm.
few of your people have the big thing to worry about. Each of them has a little thing. And you get them to understand that if you take care of those little things, the project will work. You got to believe in that. You got to understand that everybody's contribution matters. And once you know, A, that you have the right not to know things, and B, that you know what your contribution is, you're 90% of the way to the goal line.
No, that's really insightful. I wonder how how many people I guess say, oh, I already know how to put my shoes on, does that and what does that tell us if the person is approaching it like that?
Well, it's probably somebody that you either A, don't want around, or B, that you're going to have a lot of trouble with until you make them see the light of day. If they
Mm,
say that, they're probably going to be the first person to get blisters. But
mm,
as I've said before, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's arguably one of the five greatest basketball players of all time, 4 years in a row, he sat down with this little man a foot and a half shorter than he was and watched him teach him how to put on his socks and sneakers and didn't say a word, just did what he was told. You have to understand, you have to believe that you like to think at least that the person who's over your head in the company knows what he's talking about. And you're going to have people, yeah, you're going to have people who fight you. And but that I think goes back to rule number one, which is hire the best people you can find. And those people are generally not the argumentative type. So you should be able to weed that out in the interviewing process. You would
mm.
hope.
Yeah, makes sense. And what other, I think, anecdotes are really powerful because, people can relate to them. So, are there other things that really stand out to you that were done really well that could translate, to other organizations?
We had checklists. Checklists were a very important part of our work in the front office. We had checklists for everything. Just
Mm,
like pilots have a checklist, there's checklists in the cockpit that they go over for every, starting the engines,
hmm
takeoff, taxi, the whole thing. We had checklists for all the stuff we talked about before. On the week of a road trip, every player and everybody in the front office got a sheet of paper that was the itinerary for the road trip. And it was thought out well in advance. And it was the buses are going to leave at this time from this place. The charter flight leaves from this gate at the airport at this time. And by gosh, if the bus left at 3 o'clock and you weren't on it, they didn't care. They had told you and you better be there.
mm,
And so we had these checklists that through the season all went very well. If we noticed during the course of the season that something went wrong, we could adapt the checklist right away. But as I said before, in the off season, that's when we tore everything down and started all over again. Like, hey, how do we do this? How do we make sure that a road trip works well? Let's
mm,
go at this from the very beginning. How do we know that everybody's going to get their room key in a hurry, or that room service is going to be in the right place? Even to the extent that here's how serious we were about it. In the road trips when we were staying in a hotel, the trainers who were in charge of the players' health, we always put them in rooms right next to the elevator, so that if a player on another floor needed them, they could get there quickly.
mm,
Little teeny things, like the little things take care of the big things. little things like that that made certain that everything worked well. So you have to constantly be looking at your systems, and don't just sit back and say, hey, we got this beat, hey, we're cool, we're hot, we got this knocked. No, you don't. Always be looking at how to make it better, how to improve it, how to keep it one step ahead of where you were last year.
It sounds like, though, one of just through listening to some of these stories that communication is a major contributor to even how maybe employees feel about where they work.
One of the great mottos in the National Football League is from Bill Belichick, who's the coach of the New England Patriots, very successful, all those Super Bowl victories. And his line that he gives to his players is "Do your job." Really simple, right? It's very okay. It works on two levels. Number one, do your job, do what we pay you to do. But number two is do your job. If you're the left tackle, don't try to do the coach's job. If you're the wide receiver, don't try to do the general manager's job. With a Cowboy front office, you could go to Tex at any time and ask him anything. You could say, why don't we pay people in cash instead of paychecks? I don't know, I'm picking something out of thin air. And he would discuss it with you. I mean, I can remember times when I started with him, I was a 25-year-old wet behind the ears sportscaster. And I was dealing with Tex Schramm, who was the second most powerful man in the NFL. And he treated me like an equal. There was no feeling of talking down to me. It was always back and forth straight. Would he argue with you? Oh, yeah, he loved a good argument, but it was always friendly. It was always like a debate. It wasn't, you stupid idiot screaming at you. And so he encouraged people to bring ideas to him. If he didn't like them, he would say so, and that would be the end of it. You wouldn't press the case too hard because he didn't want to hear that kind of debate. But if you had a good idea, if you said, hey, would you think this would work? He'd say, yeah, let's try it and see what happens. He was open to people his door was open to us, to bringing in new ideas. And that makes everybody feel like they're contributing.
And then I guess, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen then, in your career about, I mean, you mentioned fear. Are there others?
Fear is the main one. Fear is the one that's that just involves being treated inhumanely. But sure, there are other ones. There, the discounting that we just talked about with, Tex being open to new ideas. A lot of places that you work, the door's not open. The door's closed. Don't bring us ideas. We're smarter than you are. It really all is basically the top looking down at the people under them. If you think about that, well, I have all these people under me. That's kind of a negative way to look at it. If you think about, I have all these people that I work with, then now you've got a different mindset. Now you're becoming part of a team. And if my one motto that I come up with over and over again to everybody is, it's not about you, it's about the team. If you make it about you, they're not going to work for you because they're going to see that you're just after glory. But if you're about the team, if the old saying about you can accomplish anything you want to if you don't care who gets the credit. If you're about the team, they'll bust their chops for you. They'll work hard because they know they're valued. It's all about being valued.
It was funny when you were saying that. That's exactly what I was thinking. We have one of our leaders in the organization who, that's what he likes to remind everybody. Remind the leadership it's not about you. If your team does well, and if your team gets paid well, and your team, they make, then things will go well for you as a leader. But it's about the team and their glory.
Yeah. And the team goal. The team goal with the Cowboys was to win the Super Bowl every year. Obviously, you don't win it every year, but the years that we did win, after the game, we have this big party back at the hotel that we're staying at for the Super Bowl, and the trophy is there, and you get to hold it and have your picture taken with it, and that's a pretty cool moment for somebody who works in the front office. And so it's just there are goals beyond getting a paycheck, and if you can be made to feel part of a team, then the check will be nice, so I can pay my bills this week. But you can also say, hey, look at what I did. There's a story that may not even be true about some VIPs touring the Kennedy Space Center just before the launch of Apollo 11, the first flight to the moon. And there's this guy in the corner with a broom sweeping up the floor, and somebody looked at him and said, keeping the place tidy, huh? And the guy turns to him and says, no, I'm helping us get to the moon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the feeling that you want to get.
There was one time I was watching some Disney movie with my daughter, and at the end there was in the credits there was someone for the coffee cart. And it's the same thing, you may not be the one on the screen, but like by taking care of the people, the directors, the actors, the actresses, I mean, you're enabling them to do the best job so that they don't have to worry about, am I thirsty? Am I hungry?
Yeah,
And letting those
yeah,
things get in the way.
absolutely. You're there to help reach the goal, whatever the
Mhm.
goal is that the company has set. You're there to help get to that point. And it's even better if, as the company forms the goal, they take your input as to what that should be.
Mm.
And again, that goes back to just having your door open and letting people listen to you. I will say this about Tex. There was one time when we were talking about something, and I said, now this was back in the mid 70s, so how long ago this was. And I said, if we could make exact copies of Roger Staubach, our great quarterback, jersey with the same colors and the same design and the same materials in all different sizes. Back then, jerseys were just really cheap foreign knockoffs that didn't look anything like the real thing. I
Huh.
said, if we could make exact copies of Roger's jersey in different sizes, every kid in America would want to have one. So we could make a fortune. And
Mm.
Tex thought about it for a moment, and then he said, if we did that, it wouldn't have its special cachet anymore. So he shot the idea down. Well, it became $1 billion business, right?
Mm.
I have an NFL jersey in my closet, and I kind of never let him forget that. Every time we saw a kid with the jersey on, I'd say, Tex, that was my idea. Remember that? And he would kind of just laugh, and he could admit when he was mistaken.
No, that's good too. That's important as a leader to be able to admit when
Yep,
you're wrong.
absolutely.
Well, this has been a really great conversation, and I appreciate the insights you shared. Mark, what are the three things you'd like to leave top of mind with our audience today?
Well, number one would be that we hate turnovers in football. Interceptions and fumbles will kill you, but we also hate turnover in the workplace. The statistics say that it costs you 1/3 of a departing employee's salary to replace him,
Mm.
because you've got to have people have to cover up for the departed employee. You got interviewing, you got hiring, you got onboarding, HR, all that stuff. So that's number one. You want to cut down on turnover. Number two is you want to be certain that you are receptive to your people and their ideas and their problems and their thoughts. And number three, through number 100, is it's not about you, it's about the team. That's the one to remember.
Absolutely. Well, how can folks learn more about what you do and get in touch?
Very simple. The website is leadwithprinciple.com, and that's principal with an LE at the end, not an AL. AL is school, principal. Leadwithprinciple.com. I have an online course that, because I'm a journalist and I write very tight, it's very short. I'm not going to have you watch 55 hours of video. I think the total time in it is about 2.5 hours, and it just highlights a lot of what we've talked about today in more detail. But it's a very simple program that, if you try it, you will see, and you try it and you apply it really well, you'll see that it does work and it pays huge dividends, because you're going to cut turnover by a large percentage.
That's great. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. We really appreciate having you here.
Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it very much. Appreciate it.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.
Hey! It's your tomorrow.